So the lines are open on 0861 987 000. This is where we're looking forward to hearing from you on various of these issues that will play themselves out, especially coming from the weekend that was going into a brand new week. The weekend papers as well, you saw them just basically giving us a sense of some of these developments in the news space. And yeah, I would like to hear from you on various of these issues as well. I told you earlier on that it was a busy weekend, especially where the political space is concerned. We saw, for instance, the Democratic Alliance, they were there in Tshwane, the EFF, they were in Boksburg, and a lot coming out of these political parties as they position themselves for the upcoming local government elections. The EFF spending the weekend at their plenum in Boksburg. This would be ahead of the elections. The party is saying here that we need to be strategic around young people and how then we tend to see them playing a greater part in the local government elections or the upcoming elections, saying the 2024 general elections should teach us something here. The EFF is calling for all young people to be automatically registered to vote once they turn 18. Party leader Julius Malema arguing here that registration should not be an optional hurdle but a legal standard. What do you make of that? Saying this should be a strategy at least that help us in terms of attracting young people or pushing them into that space so they vote. At the same time, we saw the Democratic Alliance, Helen Zille is saying steer clear or be careful of voting for these new parties, these young parties, especially there in Tshwane. If you're in Tshwane, what do you make of these statements? I mean, we saw Action SA just coming through and the momentum just coming through as well in terms of the multi-party governance here. But Helen Zille is saying voting for smaller parties or even independents would be you splitting the votes, and that does not help in any way. The parties that have realistic chances of governing Tshwane would be the ANC and the Democratic Alliance. Let's talk about this on 0861 987 000. In a moment, we'll be welcoming Aisha Ramatina, who's coming through as a journalist, coming through to give us a sense of all of these developments as we go into a brand new week. But the lines are open. Let's talk. We'll start in Soshanguve. That's where we find George Jijo. Good morning. Welcome to the show. How's it, George?
I'm trying, my brother.
How was the weekend?
It is ringingile chomiaka bila long as good voice out ya khuthala ke ra mata ka o safe.
Re sharp we sale together whatever.
I'm pointed together as one. Why think you utlo wa bolela mo Kate ne? About this EFF. You know, EFF, they will always saying the same thing, that let's attract the 18 years, the 16 years, in one of our is about the age they don't know they are young. Ne?
Yeah.
But they are not, they don't have interested anymore, Pila Cat. Most of them on street, if you can just walk around and ask them where the media how do you feel, and then what do you see, what's the hope? And then they will tell you, we don't have a hope. We're just going there to the line or not just there's nothing. They don't have hope anymore.
But why? I mean, we saw young people change the trajectory of South Africa in terms of where we find ourselves, where we come from, the youth of 1986. And even before the youth of 1986, you'd see young people just getting up as activists from back in the years in different of their corners, others even going into exile, in fighting for South Africa, for the status quo to change. What is different from that youth and this youth now? Why can't we also take it upon ourselves as young people to say that not in our name, we want to see change and we want to see a change now?
That when you are at home, you are sitting, you are not at school, né? And then you feel like, man, I need to be at school, man. I just want to be like other kids, get a uniform, and then so that I could attend at school. What are they doing there? But when you are in the classroom, and then that's where you're starting to feel, man, I'm thinking, no, I don't see it. Sometimes That's why, yeah, you find that many people of by they are young kids, at school, at school, they are just going there. Or no, that's my certificate. But mostly, but by the wrong, no, they are there or no, by one and two year long school, which is like it's like this ticket here, ANC, yeah, the ANC party take off. They just want to be there or no. I don't know young Robona because it's our first vote. But the hope they don't have hope, Shem, over they don't see nothing. They don't see nothing. Even if politics, they are not interested in that or no. What is politics? What is that? What are you talking about? Because of politics, they are not sharing with the community. Politics, they are sharing on their own. The members, the membership card, if you don't have that membership, they don't share a way with the individual.
But what has gone wrong, and then who do we lay the blame on when we look at voter apathy, especially where young people are concerned? Because we do have these student movements in universities, we do have young structures within political parties. The student commands, the youth leagues. At the same time, you have your SASCOs, your DASOs, so they are there. And this would be platforms for young people to start in any way asserting themselves from there. And do we say then that the political parties will need to do more in convincing young people and showing them that there is still power in this X, or it also becomes the IEC's duty to ensure that as they embark on all of these blitz around voter and registration and young people, that they too would make voting fashionable? Where are we squarely lying this on? And what needs to be done? What can we do then, George? Especially looking at the fact that we hear now the EFF saying that it should be somewhat of a legal obligation for you to vote, especially when you turn 18. So does this become a strategy? Political parties, where do we place them? And also the IEC, where do we place the IEC in encouraging young people to go vote?
In the universities here, they can see because of more stepping by more on is higher grade. They can see what is the important or the relevant of this politician. But the more the high school, the middle school, they are 18 years. They don't see that. They don't know about politics. Really, so they should come down here and then share what is politics, why we are there on top, what is this, how do you start, so that they could know or no. Even though Labour Fitako University, they have that knowledge or no, what is all about politics.
Do we still see political parties maybe moving into communities to try recruit? Do we see tents set up at the corners to try and show people that we are still we operating within a branch that is led by a certain political party? Do we see councillors going onto the ground or holding meetings to show young people at least that this would be politics at play? Something that would say to young people that, wow, Linda, maybe one day I'd like to be a councillor, I'd like to be mayor. Do we see all of these things happening here, or we still have a long way to go, George? I'm just worried about young people, because we tend to describe young people as the future of the country, and they are the ones that will have to come through with new policies that would move the country forward. We always complain that in parliament, but then how then are we pushing to ensure that we prepare young people for some of those roles? We need to then have
young
people that would be ready to take on some of these responsibilities.
ba retire go kae Cat?
ba santse ba retire mona ke ba bagolo batho ba.
Ba retire batho ba bantsi ba fela ba le teng mo. Cat, if you can come here in 126 and ask her, when did you last gather? When did you last have a meeting?
As a community, like, you know, re no gagara man, re bolele ka mathata a community, di imbizonyana. Are we leaving it there? Yeah.
If you come here, you ask our councillor or the community, when did you last have the meeting with your councillor? They will tell you many years ago. Not many months, many years.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not just speaking on air or no, baby Katamang. I'm telling you because of if they call the meeting Mukasi, I'm attending each and every meeting. I'm always there.
So you know, it's, I don't know, politics need to now come and become fashionable. I think back in the years, we all as young people, we want to associate with a certain party because we felt that, you know, this is what activism would be about. And now we are nonchalant about it. They're like, you know what I mean? Voter registration. I think something has to be done.
You know, Kat, that spirit that time Nelson Mandela took over. We don't have that spirit anymore. But I know they have a spirit. The spirit you always a first black president. You go that thing, or at least the government is in our hands now. So, but now if you can just roll the ball and then over or know how they take the politics, they don't take it serious because of they don't see nothing. If you ask about the councillor or what did the councillor did for the community, nothing, Kat, nothing. They don't know nothing. They don't invite the kids. Baba, you or no, you kids, what do you need? What do you? And then always when they call the meeting, they want to come and tell you and leave. They don't ask the people who know. People, let's tell us what do you need? Where are you now? And then you and I, how do we work? They don't. Even now, Lim Councillor Waruna in 26, I'm not, or maybe he's always drunk.
Yeah.
How can he go into give the community, the youth especially,
that little hope, you know what I mean?
A bright, yeah or no? If you are a councillor, this is how we work. If you are a community leader, or a community the street committee, this is how we work. They don't have.
We'll need to do better. And I think that the more we see these despondency from young people, the more it's going to be difficult, especially in the upcoming elections, to rope them in. So we need to strategize now more than ever in ensuring that we speak to the base, because the young people will be the base, and get it right. I want to also touch on what we saw there in Swane. The Democratic Alliance was there in Swane at the weekend. They had an elective conference. Helen Zille saying that and cautioning to say that, it won't help in voting for smaller parties, because then this would actually be splitting the votes, and it won't they won't bring about tangible change, even going to a point of saying the only parties with the capabilities of changing the Gauteng metros around would be the ANC and the Democratic Alliance. All of these other parties, it will then be somewhat of a waste of a vote. What do you make of this, especially when we've seen parties like your Action SA, we've seen parties like your Rise Mzansi, and all of them just moving into some of these spaces. Some of their officials are MMCs as well, but Helen Zille tends to suggest here that this would be somewhat of an indictment, a waste of the vote. What do you make of that, George, before we let you go?
Kat, in short, before I ate your time, because we're not a Kat, you know what, Helen Zille ugugile sham, she's old. This party, so that's why it's undermining her. They don't have that thing, that power. It's until even ANC or DA. They are the parties, those who mostly have youth. if they can combine these parties that also they are not together, it will explode a big bomb. On go to see. ANC cat is only bakegulu and bakalabe. Just imagine there, born and if they say let's make ANC renew, they will bring a mayor Olikandi Gotemantashi. Maraket. They will bring a mayor who is old, like Bofigilem Balula. They are all old. They don't come with a brand new things. They don't have the plan. They always talk about it. It's not exploding now. And the DA is supported because of what this party, DA is a national party, yeah, so it's a white party people in no, party people by they are blacks, DA. They are young people. Why they don't have those those positions?
Yeah, we'll see, man. This are bound to be an interesting local government elections, especially when you saw what happened in the previous elections. You know, there was somewhat of a change that came through those elections. We'll see whether that will be the spirit that moves into the local government as well. But George Katlego, thank you very much for the call.
Prince ne ke mmotsisa ke re a ke re mo ena ke re a re boeleng ko old government wa hana re ne ke re why the tšhelete ba khone bisetsa ko national treasury rena re sa boele ko mao no no ka re nie re AfriForum e tsa re ya
Sharp George, thank you very much for the call, man. George calling us there from Soshanguve, just in our open line. Remember that the lines are open. Let's talk about all of these developments, whatever is on your mind this morning, especially looking at the week ahead and your expectations there. Aisha Ramatina joining us this morning, coming through as a journalist, and she's coming through to help us just make sense of some of these developments. And you at home, let's talk on 0861 987 000 at Power FM 987 at Katlego Legodi _ there on X. Let's reflect as well on WhatsApp. This would be on 083 303 7093. Aisha, good morning. Welcome to the show.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm okay. How are you doing, Aisha?
I'm great. I can't complain.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for coming through to give us your time. I mean, you just stepped into a conversation here with George. We were reflecting on the economic freedom fighters and their plenum at the weekend. We saw the party just meeting, their officials meeting there just to strategize around the local government elections. And this would be what all of these organizations are doing now as they try by all means to salvage and take up an opportunity of the moment presented in trying by all means to come across as being fashionable, as being the right parties going into the local government elections. The EFF is suggesting here that change lies in youth participation, and that if we don't strategize around young people and where or what role they play within the elections, then we're not going to move things around, especially in just reinforcing change on the ground. What do you make of this argument that they're making around young people? It seems like, you know, every election, there seems to be somewhat of a concern around young voters and youth apathy where these elections are concerned, Aisha.
You know, when it comes to young people, I think this is a genuine concern. Reason being, young people are majority of the voters if we look at the statistics, especially active voters, people who know what is most likely to happen after elections and people who are most likely to stay if we're thinking about like birth and death rate, you know. So they will stay with the consequences far longer than older people. So the aim of the EFF and just other political parties in general wanting more young people to invest and partake in these political campaigns is actually important, firstly, but also crucial, because if they don't, then what do we say about our future as a country? Are we leaving it in the people who are most likely to, unfortunately, kick the bucket, or are we putting it in the future of the youth in the country? And are we also empowering them to be leaders? Because if they don't partake in politics, who will take the stool, the chair in future?
Yeah.
So we need to worry about that a lot.
I was asking as well earlier on to say, where are we getting it wrong? Especially where young people are concerned, because it's not the first time that we're hearing around this issue. It looks like year in, year out, or election in, election out, we tend to be faced with this reality of young people not coming through to vote. Where are we getting it wrong, Aisha? Especially when we have student movements in universities and colleges, when we have youth movements within these political parties that would really speak to some of these young people's issues, and even political parties themselves with programs that will be all inclusive, especially when you look at how they talk about things around unemployment and the likes. You'd find that obviously they would talk about young people. Then why aren't young people barging here in seeing this as a viable option in changing their lives? The issue of the X, it doesn't look like that X, speaks to them. Hence, we hear of all of these parties saying more will need to be done.
I think the main problem is what Abu George addressed earlier, that we don't start at grassroots levels. We want to start where university students are concerned, but there's someone in high school who is also eligible to vote. How do we fill that gap? How do we bring them into the conversation? Yes, they are younger than most voters, but they are voters nonetheless. So if they're not in the conversation, then how do we fill the gap? But aside from the high school learners that are not participating in the conversation itself, in varsity, most people get into politics for the wrong reasons. And I say this because I've seen it even with universities around Pretoria. You find students from UP or students from CUT and like your alternative that's in all, being in like BOSASCO, EFFSC, and all these political parties. You have DASO, and they're not there for the right reason. They're losing the plot because they're using this as a way to just make acquaintances, which is not a bad thing. But making acquaintances in a way that the aim of the political structure is lost. Yes, they do assist with NSFAS, students getting accommodations, but when all those problems are over, what they resort to is drinking and just exploiting the university's resources instead of focusing on more things that could benefit them, like attending roundtables, attending debates, and participating in electoral committees before elections themselves. So there's a lot that's lost in the stew of student activism, because attention is always diverted to the wrong things when it's supposed to be diverted to the right things.
So we see the EFF as well, as we wrap up this conversation around young people. We see the EFF strategically saying that we need to, as a country, now move to ensure that it becomes somewhat of a prerogative of young people moving into that space to vote, calling on all young people to be automatically registered to vote once they turn 18. We saw the party leader as well arguing at the weekend that registration should not be an optional hurdle but a legal standard if we were to achieve this issue of making people go vote, especially young people. We know often at times the IEC would be coming through with programs. We know that they are now even making noise on social social media, with the adverts targeting young people to say, let's try find them where they play about. This would be on some of these spaces online, and just making sure that they are aware of their obligation and the right to vote. So how do we actually see some of these strategies playing themselves out in terms of ensuring that young people go vote? And is what the EFF calling for here something that can work, especially when you look at the fact that there is a genuine concern around young people and this voter apathy?
Oh, this one is tricky because not everyone has proper resources, right? Some people live far from certain voting points, which means that the whole voting period should be longer to accommodate certain people. But I'm not against it at all. I think automatically being registered as a voter is a good thing, because then you actually have a right to complain. People always complain about outcomes of politics and the democracy in general without participating in it, and I don't think that's fair. And either way, whether you vote or you don't vote, you're technically still voting. If you're quiet, you are voting and saying, I am agreeing with the current situation I'm in. And if you're voting against it, then that's when you're saying, my voice needs to be heard. So if young people are holding back, then they're also holding their own power back. So I think the whole mandatory thing is quite essential, but it also needs proper channels to let everyone know that it should or could happen. Because if people don't know that they are mandatory voters, then they might not like the outcome of it, and then they'll actually have a proper right to complain.
Let me just remind our listeners at home that you find us this morning in our news update feature, and we're doing it with Aisha, who's on the other side, and we're looking at developments and news that are likely then to flow from the weekend going into the week, especially when you look at those that are likely then to be big talkers going into a brand new week. So Aisha is here with us, and you at home, let's talk on 0861 987 000. They're on X on at Power FM 987 at Katlego Legodi _ and just wrapping up this issue around the economic freedom fighters. They're now preparing and looking at the upcoming elections. What would be their chances? Remember that they would always maintained here, Aisha, that they're a government in waiting, but we've seen the landscape change somewhat in the previous elections, especially where multi-party governance is concerned. What then become their chances? How do they actually remain relevant, looking at the issues that are facing us in our communities now?
Oh, this one is tricky because you remember during the last elections, the EFF had a very large number, but towards the end of the whole election period, they lost a lot of people. And maybe it could also stem from what Julius Malema said towards the end of the campaign. The whole, if you want all foreigners to go out, then you can keep your vote, those type of things. We're not saying that he must, I'm trying to find an English word for this, plead or cry for votes, but also knowing what your voters want is also a chance to win, So if he doesn't, if him and the political party itself don't know what their voters want, then it will be quite hard to reach them. But at the same time, they still have to maintain their own core principles. So it's like they're running on a thin line. But I think there is a chance if they do their campaigns properly.
Yeah, let's wait and see. All of these parties, they really have it cut out for them, especially where the upcoming local government elections are concerned. I want us to look at a story that came out of the weekend, and it still will see us talking here, especially where General Senona is concerned. We saw him last week there at the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry at length, going into his testimony here at the weekend. We saw his lawyers saying here that the Major General Senona, they're trying to establish facts surrounding what they call his unlawful removal from his office at the weekend. Senona's attorney here, Rudolf Baloi, telling the media at the weekend that Senona and his secretary were allegedly removed from his office and his laptop was confiscated. KwaZulu-Natal, the police there, just rejecting claims that he was forcibly removed here. In a statement, they said that, Senona was not forcibly removed from his office, explaining that he voluntarily left after security raised concerns about his arrival on a weekend, parking outside a reserved bay, did not sign the register as well, and it looks like his devices as well were taken here. Remember, he now becomes a person that would be under investigation, looking at what flows from the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry. What do you make then of Major General Senona? At some point we had Aisha, him saying that he was not, he's one person that is worried about his safety, and now we see all of these developments around him coming from the weekend.
With this one, firstly, the police is saying that the whole thing was unusual, right? Because he allegedly parked outside the building and not like in like a proper designated parking bay. And then he was joined by another Hawks colonel by like around 45 minutes before entering the building. And for some reason, this was seen as like a security breach. So, like, there was a lot of red flags that the police were saying, and from their side, they're not seeing as him being forced out, rather than they seeing it just as following protocol. The whole Madanga Commission thing, obviously he's going to be in the spotlight. He's linked, allegedly linked to Vusmusi Matlala and the handling of confidential police documents. So without a doubt, he's going to feel like he's attacked. But I don't think the police were trying to attack him. They were just doing their job.
Yeah. But also when you look at all of these issues then flowing from the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry, we saw President Cyril Ramaphosa, for instance, last week recommending names of those that should now be investigated at length, and also just giving us a sense of what would then flow from the recommendations of the work that has been done, preliminary work done by the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry as they continue with their work. General Senona's name is one of the names that would be there. There are various of these names of people that have appeared. Some have not appeared here. Major General Lesetja Senona, Major General Richard Shibiri, Brigadier Mbangwa Nkwashu, Brigadier Rachel Macheng, Sergeant Fani Nkosi. We know very well that here in Ekurhuleni there will be your Imogen Mashazi. There would also be your Kwanazi here that would be fingered as some of the people that as officials that will now need to be investigated at length. Some of these referrals, do they give us a sense of matters on the move as we would want to see accountability at play, or what do we read into these names that were sent out for referrals by the president?
Maybe there is a chance of finding out like more things that need to be in, but I don't think that the names needed to be public as yet, because none of these people are actually charged for anything, and if anything, it's just bringing more light into the whole Madanga Commission and bringing unnecessary attention to what the police have to do, because now a lot of people will be getting into the case itself with emotions. So I think the names are not necessarily needed at this point, because if people are under investigation, then technically not charged for anything. It's just all hearsay that they did this or that. So maybe it wasn't like the right tactic from the president, but maybe at the time he saw it fit and necessary. I'm just on the fence about it.
And also, when you look at it, then are we now starting to see the gravity of the work of the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry? I know on the other side, the Parliamentary Ad Hoc Committee, they will not go all the way into the year. Theirs would be to wrap up the proceedings at least by February. But already, when you look at this work that has been done, are we really getting a sense of the value, emanating from that particular briefing by Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi last year before all of these started? Or, we still have a long way to go in really getting to the crux of what is really happening in South Africa right now?
Can you please repeat that again?
I was saying that looking at, maybe taking it all the way back from the time when we saw Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi, the KZN police commissioner, brazenly go into that space of the media to start it all off, and looking at where we find ourselves now, would you say that we are already seeing the value of actually at least getting an understanding of some of these things that are happening in the country right now? And would you say that indeed it was prudent that Mkhwanazi lifted the lead in the way that he lifted the lead, looking at where we find ourselves now, especially looking at where we started as well?
I think it's important. What General Mkhwanazi did was not just brave, but it was important. It was important for us to realize that the law is not something to be played with or tainted with. So yes, he took a stance to talk about the allegations that are happening within the system itself. And the Commission has been hearing a lot of evidence from persons implicated in the allegations and has established some sort of political killings task team to address political killings in South Africa. Because even many hits have been targeted towards Lieutenant Mkhwanazi. The work is ongoing. But I still feel like what he did is important for citizens and law enforcement to realize how much of an impact corruption could be in the country.
Let's wait and see how it all flows then going into the week, especially as we saw just on Friday, the back and forth around the witness here appearing in public, and how we see all of these then really just giving us a sense of who then becomes witness E, and how do we see witness E then coming and moving into that testimony as we go into a brand new week. A reminder to our listeners at home that at 5 minutes after 1 o'clock, you find us in our news update feature, and we're doing it this morning with Aisha Ramatena, who's joining us on the other side, and we are looking at ensuring that at least we set you off for the week ahead, looking at a variety of these developments. And one of the notable issues as well, Aisha, especially starting from today, would be the issue of Advocate Andy Mutibi, who's now moving into that space of the National Prosecution Authority. He's now, we can't even call him the incoming anymore, because he'll be assuming office now. This will be, or today, this would be Monday. We saw Shamila Batoy bowing out last week and just giving us a reflection as well of how then things would have fared as she was in her role. As well, this coming through, Andy Mutibi taking up this position within the NDPP as the new National Director of Public Prosecutions, when there is renewed calls for a reform of the criminal justice system. That system has really been a feature even at the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry. But after 7 years at the helm, Shabila Batoy finally retiring, Aisha.
Oh, Shamila Batoy finally retiring has been something that made a lot of people actually quite excited. I actually recently saw a TikTok of this one man saying, finally. And then He even says that the apology from Shamila is basically something that he's not going to accept. But if a lot of people have these mixed and divided feelings regarding Shamila, maybe this is a good thing because Mutivi doesn't have a lot of people gunning it for them. Maybe the role will be the opposite of what people were seeing with Shamila. Power with being powerful instead of people seeing them as like just having authority but essentially doing nothing, because Shamila was said that she couldn't control the budget, she couldn't decide on salary, she couldn't hire and fire freely, like there was a lot going on and things happen too fast, and we also need to maybe acknowledge the fact that she is human and maybe this was a good thing for her to step down and have someone in. Yeah.
But also coming through at a time when you know very well that what is happening there at the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry would cast developments even within her office, Shamila Batoi, under the spotlight. The NPA, we know very well that is the only entity within the criminal justice system that will tend to move some of these matters forward. Hence, you tend to see even your Shamila Batoi criticized around some of the major cases here, high-profile cases that have since not moved here. If you are looking at the Gupta brothers and the extradition, that did not happen. We're not seeing people from even, flowing from the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, people in any way just finding themselves behind bars here for wrongdoing. The NPA was accused as well of bungling the extradition of Morwadi Cholota, the former personal assistant of the Free State or the former Free State Premier Ace Magashule. At the same time, we saw them just coming under fire around how they handled the case of Pastor Timothy Omotosho, where there was that failed extradition and there were those issues around Timothy Omotosho, who's been let free. So there's a lot that, he's walking into as well, and Dimutibi flowing from Shamila Batoi's term.
There is a lot. There is honestly a lot because there's a lot of technical, legal issues. And while Batoya admits that criticism is fair, there's also good news that the Constitutional Court has allowed the Gupta link corruptions to be retired, meaning the NPA can re-enroll the case. But the failed prosecution of Pastor Omotoso and the botched extradition of Morodi Cholota. Yes, I think these were the cases that really, really, really put pressure for Batoi to resign before her retirement. So yes, Limpopo is walking into a lot. I think it's like the whole Ramaphosa jumping into Jacob Zuma's stool, Jacob Zuma's chair, because there was still a lot that had to be fixed, but a person still stepped in. So the question is now, what happens next? What happens next when things are like this?
That's $1 million question here, but a lot of people will be looking at least him faring quite different from how Shamila Batoi fared here. We know the president moving as well to appoint him. His appointment was a little bit of a controversial one because he did not go through the processes of the interviews and the likes, and the president saying with effect from at least what we would see now being today, then he takes over that particular position. So let's wait and see how he fares. I told you as well that there have been these calls, at least for a reform of what is happening within that space. So we'll wait and see how he moves into that space and whether then he comes through to resolve some of these complex cases, whether he becomes that person that moves somewhat some of these matters forward. A reminder to our listeners at home that you find us still in our news update feature, and this morning doing it with Aisha Ramatena, who's coming through on the other side just to help us make sense of some of these developments here. I wanted to move to this one, Aisha, where we saw the Gauteng crime prevention wardens, now they've been officially declared as peace officers. We saw this happening last week. We saw the police ministry there. We saw the justice ministry there as well. The acting police minister, Firoz Kashalia, saying the decision to designate the wardens as peace officers was not taken lightly, especially when you saw what happened last year when we saw even the public protector saying they need now to be a different approach to how we are treating Amapanyaza. What do you make of that development flowing from last week, and now we see them entering this week as peace officers, Aisha?
This is a good thing from my perspective. The fact that they're also just training with the SANDS, they're going specialized in accredited training, and just to ensure that they understand their powers, they operate within the law, they respect constitutional rights, and just also train properly as appointed wardens with valid certificates to operate, and not just basically vigilantism happening. This helps on the ground because their presence will improve crime prevention. They will help with law enforcement support and just ease pressure on the SAPS resources as well. So I don't think it's a bad thing at all.
How do we see them now, moving into some of these spaces? What does this, them being peace officers, what does that come with, Aisha? Especially looking at the fact that there were concerns around their safety and how they would move into some of these spaces. There were concerns that they were unlawfully constituted, that they should never have been deployed to fight in the front lines of fighting crime. So what does this mean then for them? Does this mean that now they're going to be armed, they're going to be resourced? What does this come with, them being declared as peace officers?
I'm not really sure if maybe they will be given certain weapons or certain things to operate with, but I know after they disbanded last year, they created some way to make sure that their deployment is backed by proper law and that they work within the legislative framework to guide their powers. Hence, I talked about vigilantism earlier on, that they won't necessarily make their own rules, but they will follow a set of rules that will be given to them. And this is quite important because now you're giving people power that they can't overdo. They can't overdo in the sense of they can't misuse it. Because if you are taking a lot of people that are not qualified for a certain position and you give them the chance to be trained, at least you're filling in that gap of them misusing or potentially misusing their powers. So maybe this special and accredited training is what would help them to be like a force multiplier for the SAPS, just to assist the police and not necessarily replace them. Yeah.
Again, one thing that we saw, especially coming out of the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry, Aisha, would be just how rampant crime would have been in the country and how there's a need now more than ever for confidence to be instilled around crime fighting efforts that we see playing themselves out. Crime is out of control in the country right now, and a lot of people just basically would want to see, things done in a little bit of a different way going forward. Would you say that this would then mean that maybe probably each and every province should have these peace officers, that we need reinforcement as much as we can in fighting crime, because crime is out of control everywhere. If you go into Gauteng, you move into Limpopo, you move into the Eastern Cape, you move into Northwest, and you move into KZN, you know that the common factor would be the issue of crime. If you go into the Western Cape, the Cape Flats, the common common issue would be the issue of crime. So would you reckon that maybe going forward, some of these provinces where we don't have these crime or peace officers, that maybe they too would need to come up with strategies that would help them in reinforcing the work of the police, so we're able to adequately fight crime?
Yes, yes, definitely. I know Panyaza Lisufi talked about Gauteng being often seen as the epicenter of crime in South Africa, as the country's economic hub, and that's why crime affects almost everyone in Gauteng. But that reality is not just a reality to people who live in Gauteng. It happens in Northwest, it happens in Western Cape, and just like you said, crime happens everywhere, and with that, we need some sort of action and not just talk, because children are killed everywhere, women are attacked everywhere, people are robbed everywhere. So we can't say a province should fold its arms and say we are the only ones that will have these type of people. So maybe an empowerment of sorts should be done in other provinces to ensure that there is some sort of assistance with the people in the communities to assist the SAAPS, and just to ensure that there's no abuse of power over policing. There's just blurred lines between the police and the provincial structures. So creating a proper legal framework and training to protect the public from past mistakes and current mistakes, and to alleviate everyone's worries.
Yeah, I think we need, all hands on deck, in resolving some of these issues. Crime is something that is brazenly out of hand, and something will need to be done here. Aisha, whilst we still have you, I want us to look at the issue around Thabo Bester. We saw the Department of Correctional Services confirming that the convicted killer and rapist Thabo Bester has now been transferred from Kgosi Mampuru prison in Pretoria to Ebongweni, the super maximum correctional facility there in KZN. I know very well that even last week when Ket Matlala appeared before the courts, he mentioned Ebongweni to say that he would want to be moved back into Kgosi Mampuru so that he's able to consult with his lawyers and they're able to move forward as the trial gets underway. But the murder accused, Vusumuzi Ket Matlala, still remains there at that particular facility. We see the spokesperson for Correctional Services, Singaba Kongumalo, saying that the department really confirming that Thabo Bester has now been moved to Ebongweni, and saying as well that this would help as well in really just looking at securing some of these offenders. What do you make of this move? It looks like Ebongweni is now becoming popular, especially where some of these criminals or alleged criminals would be concerned, Aisha.
I think I understand why the authorities don't trust him, because officials have talked about how he's a very highly manipulative offender. Even from prison, he previously ran business deals. He posed as a TV executive on video calls. He orchestrated sophisticated escapes. And Ebongweni has tight controls, and it's meant to shut down any chance of him running operations behind bars. So that is quite important, because he's a high-risk criminal. Yes, we talk about other criminals being in Kgosi Mampuru and having better conditions, for lack of better words. And Thabo Bester actually is missing those privileges, because we even talked about having access to laptops for studies. Even his lawyers were upset that they were not given proper notice, and this would violate the client's rights. But I don't think Ebongweni is such a bad place. It is important for a criminal that is potentially a flight risk to be in such a facility, because now the authorities know their whereabouts at all times. Instead of asking themselves what is happening with this specific offender, knowing very well he can flee the country at any point and can find ways to escape the prison cell, the correctional facility at any point.
Yeah, that becomes important because, I mean, we know very well that this particular facility would house dangerous and high profile prisoners, looking at where then we find ourselves. But if you're looking at a person like your Thabo Bester, I mean, this is one person that has already escaped from Mangaung Correctional Facility. Remember that he is one person that was even repatriated here to come back into the country after having fled the country with Dr. Nandipa Magudumana. So this would be issues that would then maybe motivate us to why this person would find themselves there. But at the same time, I mean, we're really looking at the police tightening measures here, especially around the security where some of these accused are concerned. Aisha, it looks like there is a bit of a tight facility. They're running a tight course there. We hear that 24 hours or 23 hours locked in, only 1 hour to see the sun and move around. So that is bound to in any way ensure that you are not a flight risk, none whatsoever.
One of the conditions at Ebongweni, the reason why I'm laughing is because they like send shivers down my spine when you think about how a normal human cannot live in such conditions. I mean, 23 hours like away from the sun is crazy. Like, and the heavy surveillance as well, the strict limits on contact and movement. I know Thabo Bester was moved for security reasons because of his history of manipulation, his ability to run all these schemes from inside a prison, and that whole dramatic escape in KZP. But at the end of the day, he's still human, And with him being human, we start thinking about how he has rights, and are these rights not being violated in one way or the other? And if they are, how do we then fix that? But also making sure that he is within the confinement of that correctional facility.
And Aisha, what do you then make of this bid, especially by Ket Matlala? We saw him last week appear alongside other accused and his wife here in Johannesburg. And we know very well that he is one person that was moved as well to Ebongweni. And a lot of people then looking at how does that then affect the trial. The trial is getting underway. We saw even his lawyer saying that she's looking at applying for somewhat of for him to be moved back, so she's able to consult with him. So how do we see that one playing itself out? Do we see that then in any way helping move us forward? And at the same time, I mean, this is one person that still has to appear again before the Parliamentary Ad Hoc Committee. He has appeared before Parliamentary Ad Hoc Committee, but at the same time, is one person that would be a central character where these processes are concerned. The Madlanga Commission of Inquiry, and even what then would happen there at Parliament. So he still has to appear before Madlanga. How do we see all of these then playing themselves out? Is he likely to win this one? Is saying that he should be moved back from Ebongweni, and the lawyer saying as well that she's not able to consult with him because of some of these developments. And does that hold?
Maybe it will hold. I think time will tell. But with his defense making sure that they're trying by all means necessary to bridge the gap and try and make things easier for him, maybe it will. Because we also need to remember the fact that Matlala is quite powerful in terms of the stature that he holds in society, which means he probably has the best lawyers in hand. And with him having the best lawyers or the best defense team, that could assist in finding a plea one way or the other to help his demands get into fruition. So yeah, Ket Matlala is yeah, it could happen.
Yeah, let's just wait and see how things would flow from here. But just wrapping it up with you, Aisha, looking at the Parliamentary Ad Hoc Committee, we are expecting for them to also start the process and continue this week. Last week, just looking at developments around your Brown Mukhotsi as someone that would still have to appear before this committee. He was concerned around his security detail, even wanting for the committee to pay for his security here. He's now been subpoenaed to appear before this committee. Him and your Paul O'Sullivan. How do you expect to see these going and taking us into a new week, especially when you look at the fact that it now becomes a race against time? This becomes the last month for the Parliamentary Ad Hoc Committee to do their work.
Yeah, Brown Mukhotsi, I think his appearance has just been complicated by a lot of security concerns, and the subpoena for him to appear, just his request for private security is something that is interesting, but maybe if we look into it, we will see how the situation can get out of it being fluid, and with ongoing discussions and developments, just to ensure that there's progress of the inquiry. So there's issues in finalizing his testimony, but he's still involved in controversial incidents where his car was reportedly shot in Vosloo and to the east of Joburg. Yeah, so it has been taken to police custody, but his statements have been taken by the police, and it's questions on multiple allegations, including attempted murder and corruption. So, yeah, I don't have much to say about this one, but let's see how he prepares to testify before the ad hoc committee and just see how that pans out, so that we can have like a proper opinion on it.
All right, Aisha, it's really a pleasure always starting the day with you and just engaging with you on various of these issues. We are waiting to see how then the week would flow. But there's a lot. The gift that keeps on giving here. Never a dull moment in South Africa. A lot of people asking as well all the time to say, where do you guys get the news? How do you actually structure it? But, with the gift that keeps on giving in the country, that becomes South Africa, there's no doubt that we're going to find ourselves here. I really, really appreciate you coming on, giving us your time, Aisha. Let's touch base soon. Who are you on social media? How do we follow your work as well, Aisha?
It's Amkhalang Aisha on all social platforms. Amkhalang with a G and Aisha with AY. But if it's Instagram, if you see an absolute 1104, then that's still me. But I use my name almost everywhere.
Awesome. Thank you very much for coming through and for giving us your time, Aisha. We wish you everything of the best where the week is concerned.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Aisha Ramatena joining us here as a journalist and helping us really make sense of some of these developments and where then we find ourselves how we really move into the week. There's a lot that we can expect, and you hear her just giving us a sense and a breakdown of how then the week is likely to fare. I want us to go into that briefing with MEC Lebohang Maile. I told you that around this time we're looking at just inviting Sanko to help us look at the state of Gauteng municipalities. So the MEC in the day that was just giving us a sense of how then, matters would fare, especially the financial standings of some of these municipalities in the Gauteng province. We'll break a bit as we try to get hold of Sanko. We'll bring you MEC Lebohang Maile.